Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is Andy Nguyen, and I make content on keyboards and other tech. Today we're talking about the Akko ACR Top 75, and I honestly think this is a great option because the acrylic option is only $129 and the aluminum option, full aluminum, is only $170. Unfortunately, Akko has been known for selling clone keycaps and having cheaper keyboards, but they're really working on changing that. I think the ACR Top 75 is a step in the right direction. You can also find Akko keyboards on Amazon. They're very accessible, they looked great, that very anime weeby keycaps that blended in with the case, and it made it look really cool compared to the boring black or white keyboards. So you saw like the matte keyboards being all white, you saw the black keyboards, and you saw some RGB gamer stuff. There wasn't a lot of options in between. Today's showcase is sponsored, but you know my opinion is always my own, and I actually have been very critical of Akko in the past, so I'm definitely ready to dig into this one. They have sent me keyboards prior to review, but I honestly forgot to do them because I was moving, my life's been in flux. But honestly, those keyboards were also in flux. They were transitioning to becoming more high quality, but they still had north-facing switches. That's not the greatest because it has interference with cherry profile keycaps. Today's board, the ACR Top 75, actually has south-facing switches. Yep, south-facing. So the LED would be on the bottom. That means the cherry profile keycap won't interfere with it. The unit I have here today is a $170 unit, is the full aluminum. Pretty solid, feels great in the hand. Given the choice between the $129 acrylic and $170 aluminum, the choice really boils down to whether or not you want the RGB or you want something that feels heavier and heftier in the hand. Acrylic boards, especially the more budget options, typically sound better because you don't have case ping. Cheap aluminum keyboards typically have hollowness or case ping, so I try to avoid those whenever possible, which is why I've been a huge fan of the Tiger 80 Lite. With this unit being aluminum, its direct competitors are the KBD 75, the Thera 75 V2, and in some way the Tomo, because the Tomo was also a top mount, but the Tomo is more high-end, this is more budget oriented. I'm excited about this board because it is a top mount. There's too many gasket mount options around, and we all know that Owlab is kind of leading the game in like the gaskety sound. You want the gaskety, there's plenty of options for you. The Polaris was known for gaskety, the Vega was known for gaskety. You won't be missing out, trust me. One of the things of note for this keyboard is that the hot swap sockets are not Kale. Does that say SIA? And the JSD connector is not standard AIO3. That typically happens with these more mass manufactured keyboards. They don't use the standard parts, probably for cost savings. One of the things I did notice was that the PCB here is actually 1.2 millimeters. Typically, this thinner PCB is more flexible than the standard 1.6 millimeters and is only found in more expensive keyboards or like the group buy keyboards, not typically found in off-the-shelf options like the ACR Top 75. So you got the top mount, stiff, great sound, especially great spacebar. And you have a flexible PCB, being that it's thinner. It's actually a great combination for my personal taste. The look of this keyboard, honestly, is a little bit boring, but I don't think that's a bad thing. You have a 75% layout, but you have a right arrow blocker and you have offset F-row, meaning that the F-row isn't sandwiched in there. You have a dedicated key in the top right. This layout is the most inoffensive 75% layout that is easy to use, so your fingers don't get lost in the sea of keys like the KBD 75 or even the Singa 75. This layout is probably my ideal. The board I liked before, the Hex 4B, that board unfortunately didn't have the blockers for the F-row, so it looked a little bit odd. This looks a little bit cleaner, and a lot of people do not like having the offset arrows in the bottom right. So right here, some boards have it exploded and offset. It's definitely a personal preference thing. I actually prefer when the bottom row is in one straight line. Although it looks a little boring, I think it looks very timeless and very standard, and having a cheap, reliable keyboard is better than having a fancy thing that may miss some marks in sound or feel. Speaking of sound, they did send over some Palm Silvers that I did use stock, and they sounded great. No spring ping, no leaf ping, and it sounded very clean and clacky. It definitely reminded me a lot of the tungstens I tried before. Although it's smooth, although it's clacky, although it's usable, it could benefit from some lube and film to have that fuller sound. But if you have a desire to get a clacky, sharp sound, then you can use them stock. The great thing about them is that they are $17 for a 45 pack. That means only 38 cents per switch. That is a great deal. And in terms of why it sounds good in this board does have a silicone rubber layer at the bottom, which definitely helps the sound. Like I mentioned before, cheap aluminum keyboards typically need a little bit more help. and this addition of the silicone here is kind of required. I did not use the PCB foam or the PE foam because it was adhered together and I felt like that would push it more toward the foamy and owl lab sound. I wanted to hear the dry top mount sound that we're missing from other options, and it sounds pretty good. So when I built it on stream, it is a top mount, but it has rubber rings that are reminiscent of the burger mount style that the Mode 65 had. Since I forgot those, the plate and PCB assembly are moving around in the case. Shake test, it failed. So I did add that back, and once I did add it back, the alphas sounded great even without the extra rubbers, but adding the rubbers in, the right mods sound a little bit better. The weak point of this board would be the right mods. And whenever we have any kind of weakness like hollowness or ping and it's a two-piece case like this one, you can actually separate it into the force break mod, which is basically adding tape between the top and bottom case. That allows you to reduce a lot of the ping without changing the sound signature of the board. Before we could do case foam and all that, but case foam definitely changes the sound. I did want to do that. And honestly, when we took it apart to do the force break without the internal rubber, it sounded pretty great. It's just the right side mods and the top right corner, a little bit weak. Oh, backspace hurting. Once we put everything together, still keeping the PCB foam and PE foam out, the silicone and the force break sounded great. That's where it's a little bit weak, the backspace and the delete key. Yeah, that key is really weak, but everything else sounds pretty freaking solid for a $170 aluminum top mount. At the end of the day, this keyboard with this price point, $170 for aluminum, is a great buy. It actually beats out the KD75 with a better layout and a lower price. The KD75 with hot swap is $220, the Theros 75 V2 is $270, and the Tomo is freaking expensive. That's a different price point. And with that, I'm actually really excited and really happy that there are so many more options in the affordable market to get people into the space, and especially since the affordable tier is just leveling up every single day. Honestly, you can get by with just a more mass-produced keyboard, maybe at least bare minimum get an aluminum case, and you can just live with that keyboard, just change out the switches, change out the keycaps to spice up things. Boards like this are gonna be reliable, and honestly, top mount as a sound I don't get tired of as easily. So I'd rather have one of these than to have like a gasket mount keyboard and just throw like a Dolch switch in there and kind of get tired of that sound. I'm really excited to see more modern options out of Akko and seeing how they can improve their keyboards, add more keycap options, add more switch options, so that there's more competition in the space, because at the end of the day, that all benefits the consumer. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.